Say hello to fresh Eclipse mints.
Welcome back to Lunchtime Agenda. Joining me now on my panel is Parliamentary Secretary Paul Fletcher and also the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary Lisa Singh in Canberra. Now, Paul Fletcher, going on from this metadata debate, we heard there from John Lawrence, but I want to ask you, why is it so hard to define metadata in legislation?
Well, can I just start by making a point that the security agencies and police and others have had for many years the right to get this information where it's necessary for their investigations under the Telecommunications Intercept and Access Act. That's a 1979 Act. And so that is not changing the legislation which defines the circumstances in which the agencies can obtain metadata. And again, to repeat the point, this is not the content of the communication, this is information about the communication, A party name, B party name, duration of the call and so on. What we have said is that the bill that was introduced yesterday into the Parliament by Malcolm Turnbull, Minister for Communications, will impose some obligations on the telecommunications companies to retain that metadata for a period of time.
For 2 years.
That's right. And then what the bill does is sets out quite specifically the kinds of data that are required to be retained. So it's, for example, the identity of the subscriber to the service, the source of the communication, the destination of the communication, the date, time and duration.
And that is in legislation, is that correct?
Yes. So the bill, as introduced yesterday, sets out these categories: date, time and duration of the communication, the type of the communication, the location of the equipment used in the communication. Now, there's also provision for regulations under the bill, as is normal, to flesh that out and add more granularity, but those categories are very clearly specified in the legislation.
But there's still a few question marks over this. What happens to the metadata after 2 years? Also, why do you need this regulation? Why can't metadata be so closely defined?
Well, just to be clear, again, this kind of information is generated as part of the normal operation of a telecommunications network. So, for example, if I make a call on my mobile phone to you on your mobile phone, then the telecommunications network, for its own purposes, generates data about where I was located, which base station my handset was communicating to, which base station your handset was communicating to, and so on. Okay. That's generated in the ordinary course of the operation of a telecommunications network, and it's retained today by the telcos for as long as their business needs require it. So really what is changing here is not the kind of information that's kept. What is changing is simply an obligation on those carriers, the telecommunications carriers and internet service providers, to retain that data, or to be specific, a specified set of data for that 2-year period, so that if the security agencies or police have a reason to seek it under the existing provisions of the law, then they know it will be there for longer.
All right, I want to go to Lisa Singh on this. Lisa, you've heard the explanation here from Paul Fletcher. Do you have any concerns about it? Has the case been made by the government and these security agencies for this metadata to be kept for 2 years?
Well, that's really hard to answer at this point in time, Laura, because what we've had so far is legislation rushed through the Parliament. I mean, this is where the government's got to have a conversation with the Australian people on this, and that is why we have asked for there to be proper scrutiny, because this is not just about national security, although understanding that's the government's intent. This is also about people's privacy, and I think that's what we've heard from Mr Lawrence just before. So when you're talking about legislation as controversial and as complex as this, you know, containing metadata, it requires that proper scrutiny. So we are asking that this legislation not be rushed through the Parliament in a couple of weeks, but that we use the next couple of months to actually have that scrutiny, do it through the Intelligence and Security Parliamentary Committee, have that real scrutiny into this legislation to ensure that the Australian people understand it, the Parliament understands it. We all know the challenge that George Brand has found himself in trying to understand or at least explain what metadata was and is. That is why this does need thorough scrutiny and not a rush through the Parliament.
Okay, Paul Fletcher, does it need to pass by the end of the year? This has already gone to a committee. We'll go back to the Joint Intelligence Committee, as I understand it.
So just to respond to that point, the government introduced the legislation yesterday. Now, a step in legislation is that it is introduced. The fact that it's been introduced yesterday is not a basis for saying it's being rushed, because what we've then said, the next step is this will go to the Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee on Information, Intelligence and Security. That's a bipartisan committee. It has people from both major parties and independents as well, I believe. But it's certainly the opportunity for that detailed scrutiny.
And should the Privacy Commissioner look at this as well?
Well, it is important to bear in mind that the Privacy Act applies and will continue to apply.
But if we're talking about storage of data, like in the foreign fighters legislation, the Privacy Commissioner is going to look at the storage of the biometric data at airports. Why wouldn't the Privacy Commissioner then look at the storage
and
of such metadata?
I'm just wanting to make the point that the Privacy Act does apply, and the telecommunications carriers will continue to be subject to the oversight.
I understand that, but should the Privacy Commissioner, now that so much data is being stored for 2 years, then go back and look at how this data is stored and make sure that there are no weaknesses?
That is a question that can be considered by the Parliamentary Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence and Security, and that's why there is this committee process, a bipartisan process, so that we can work through these issues.
Okay, I want to change tack now. Plenty of issues around this week. One that's come up today is this $50 billion China bank, infrastructure bank. Now, Lisa Singh, the government has some reservations about the governance of such a bank. Does Labor share those concerns?
Well, no, Labor's position is very clear. We welcome this initiative of infrastructure investment in the Asia Pacific. And I think this is a really important opportunity for Australia to engage with China, to build our relationship in the Asian century and with China. And as Paul Keating has said, to actually influence China's behaviour by being a player and a part of this. But what we've seen, Laura, from the government is absolute shambles. They're all over the place, divided on this important issue.
Okay,
so again, another international issue.
The Prime Minister wants to be the Infrastructure Prime Minister. Why does he want to be part of the Infrastructure Bank?
Well, infrastructure is important, and the Abbott government is spending a lot of money on infrastructure in Australia.
Is the government having to choose between our biggest trading partner, our closest ally?
Certainly infrastructure in Asia Pacific is important. And so this initiative, involving a number of countries in the Asia Pacific region, with China taking the lead, is certainly a very interesting one. So we have not said that we're out and out opposed to this. What we've simply said is there's a process that needs to be worked through as to the governance arrangements and so on, and we would need to be satisfied on those before we could be involved.
Okay, quickly moving to direct action before we do run out of time. We saw a deal done this week. The government finally has a policy in this space, but we've seen Greg Hunt today refusing to say whether there'll be benchmarks put in place to actually demonstrate that the government is achieving that 5% emission reduction. Why not? Why not put these safeguards, these benchmarks in place?
Well, Laura, we promised to remove the carbon tax. We've done that. We promised that we would have our $2.55 billion emissions reduction fund, and we are confident that the emissions reduction fund is a policy instrument that will achieve the objective that we've long been committed to of achieving a 5% reduction on Australia's emissions, the 2000 level of emissions, by 2020.
Is confidence a guarantee, though?
We are confident, based upon a lot of detailed work, that this market-based approach for competitively choosing projects that will achieve carbon abatement is going to bring forward a lot of proposals from business, from farmers, from community groups as to initiatives, for example, a reduction in fugitive gas emissions from landfill or from coal mines and so on. We expect to see a lot of these projects come forward, and then what we'll do is we'll assess them in terms of value for money, the dollars that the taxpayer is paying for the abatement of carbon that's generated, and we'll choose the best value ones. We think that'll be a cost-effective and a market-based way of Australia achieving its carbon abatement target.
Okay, Lisa Singh, obviously Labor's not very happy with this deal. Does that mean that Labor's going to be a little less forgiving when it comes to negotiations over the RET, for example?
Well, no, we've been very open and upfront in trying to help the government with its problem that it has created on the RET, because we want certainty for the renewable energy sector. But this dirty deal that has been done by the government on the emissions reduction fund, what they call direct action, which it's nothing at all, it is absolutely a shambles. $2.55 billion of Australian taxpayers' money going into a policy that won't reduce our emissions by 5% by 2020. There's been no cost-benefit analysis, no modelling done. So I don't know where Paul is saying the detailed work has been done.
How do you know that it won't achieve the target then?
Well, the government's done no modelling, but what we know, there's been a report 2 days ago by Reputex, which did do some modelling and shows that the government's direct action policy will only meet between 10 and 20 and 30% of reaching that 5% target. So we know there's external modelling there, but none done by the government. I mean, this is really a shambles. It's a dud of a policy. It's got no economist and no scientist backing it up, and it uses taxpayers' money at a time when apparently we have a budget crisis, according to Joe Hockey, and they want to ruin the higher education sector as well as the social welfare sector. It is just a joke, Laura.
Paul Fletcher, there's only about a minute left on the program. I will let you to respond to that, but explain to me why the government will be paying for an 18-month inquiry into an ETS that will never implement. And also today, reports from Lenore Taylor in The Guardian that the Clean Energy Finance Commission has been instructed to operate on a basis that it will be abolished, so it'll essentially be ripping money out of that corporation and it'll be operating as a shell. There's a bit of a wasteful amount of money.
Labor said we wouldn't get the carbon tax repealed, we got that done. Labor said we wouldn't get this policy through, we've got it through. So Labor has form in not predicting what's going to happen. We are confident this is going to work, and this is a market-based approach. Now, we negotiated with the cross-party senators, we've agreed terms, and we've got an outcome which now allows us to go forward and achieve significant... So you're forced into having
these two irrelevant points?
We have got an outcome which allows us to go forward and achieve significant carbon abatement through a market-based measure under which we're going to choose the best value for money projects to reduce carbon emissions.
OK, Paul Fletcher, Lisa Singh, thanks so much for joining me on this Friday Lunchtime Agenda. That is it for the program. The news is next.